What the fuck is up, party people? My name is Mystery, and welcome back to yet another video. I know I am back from my year-long hiatus, as always, but I need to make content. I can't keep everybody waiting. So let's hop right into it. A question I often get from newer draft players is, "What's the best type? What's a type I should prioritize?" And today I'm going to be ranking the types in Gen 9 Draft League singles. And just a reminder, these are just my opinions. They do happen to be the correct opinions, but they are my opinions. And yeah, let's hop right into it. So as you can see, there is already three types on here: ice, rock, and bug. And let's talk about it. And before everyone's like, "Oh, well, what about Mamoswine? What about Lichen Rock Dusk? What about Scizor?" These Pokemon, every type has good Pokemon, and they might have a reason for why they're good. Like Scizor, it's not because he's a bug type, it's because he's a steel type. Mamoswine. Ground and Ice is a really good type combo, and Ice is an amazing offensive type. But let's talk about it from the beginning. I think Bug is the worst overall type in the game. U-Turn, obviously, is an amazing move. It's one of the best in the game. But overall, the type itself, not very good. It's not a type that you should prioritize. Sticky Web, obviously, is also really nice to have. But you should not go out of your way ever to draft a Bug type if it happens to be on a Scizor or a Vikavolt or an Araquanid, like a Pokemon with another type or something that you need. Sure, that's great. But I personally don't think Bug is ever a type you should seek out, other than maybe your one pointer that is like Kricketune with webs, Spite Ops with hazards, that kind of thing. Or like I said, if it's, a Scizor. Hopping into the next one, we have Rock. This is honestly in contention for the worst type, and I really debated back and forth on it. This type is fucking terrible. Like, there's really not a lot to enjoy here. It's not good defensively. Like, it resists flying. That's probably one of its, it's flying or fire, as resistances. That's its calling card, I guess. You're weak to, fighting. You're weak to steel. You're weak to ground. You're weak to, in my opinion, two of the best types in the game. It's just not an overall good type. A lot of Pokemon have EQ. A lot of Pokemon have now CC. Steel with fairies is more common than ever. So it's just not a good overall type. Stealth Rock, obviously, once again, one of the best moves in the game. But that just isn't really how I factor into the actual type itself. I'm talking about like defensively, offensively. Lycanroc Dusk, great offensive Pokemon, but because of Tough Claws, SD, and its coverage. Outside of that, I mean, Nihilego, but who really drafts it anymore? There's not... I have notes here. There's just not a lot of rock types that you really should ever be, truly going after. My guy Archeop, shout out to him. But rock is just not a type I don't think you should ever really prioritize. Obviously with exceptions like always, but yeah, it's a very, very bad type. In contention for the worst, but I think it has a little bit more with Stealth Rock. Is a little part of it. It's not obviously my main focus is like the moves, but it's a little part of it, as well as Bug is just weak to a million things and doesn't resist much of anything other than ground, which is nice. But yeah, overall, I think rock types are a little bit more consistent, but it's still not a type that you don't you don't have to go after. Something I want to bring up is people at the end of their drafts will be like, okay, what type am I missing? They'll have like, two Pokemon they still need to draft for 6 points, and they'll be missing these three types. They'll be like, oh, I can get, Glaceon and Armaldo. And it's like, or you could just not. You could get Pokemon that are actually going to come to games. All due respect to Glaceon and Armaldo. But those Pokemon are not good. I do want to give a quick shout out to Cleavor, because I forgot to write him down, but he's an awesome rock type. I think he's cool. But that's what it takes. It takes Stone Axe, which is one of the most broken moves with sharpness, having U-Turn, all that kind of stuff. But there's not a lot of good rock types. Yeah, I think we're good. I think we can move on to the next one, being Ice, which is one of the best offensive types in the game. So it's kind of shocking to see it this far down. But everyone knows it is the single worst defensive type in the game, only resisting itself. Me personally, I've never like there's Vanillux, there's Glaceon, for like lower tier ices, but there's not a lot of like, oh, that's a great low tier. We'll get to some Pokemon in the better tiers of types that have like lower tier options. There's no like great ones. Like I said, Glaceon and Vanillux. Like if you really want to do that, Ninetales Alola is like a mid tier. There's not a lot of options there, but it is one of the best offensive types in the game. Mamoswine, obviously an incredible ice and ground stab. Kyurem is one of the best. Kyurem and Kyurem Black, which depends on the league, but a lot of leagues do allow. Very, very good Pokemon overall. I just don't think it has such a problem defensively that I'm not willing to put it any higher than this. I think it's definitely a step up from these, but I'm not making a tier by itself. I'm not putting just ice in its own tier. So yeah, we are going to finally tier our first type together, and that will be Ghost. These are not in order, by the way, just happen to be over here. Ghost is the next one up. And you might be saying, well, Ghost has an immunity. They're immune to fighting. It's an overall solid type. I disagree. Every single fighting type, and now this is hyperbole, but just about every single fighting type has knockoff. If this was in Gen, 5? I think 6 is when knockoff was buffed. If this was in Gen 5, Ghost is probably higher. But every single fighting type, it feels like, has knockoff. Has just, Dark Stab in general to punish it. And how many good defensive Ghosts are there really? Like, how many Ghost types are like, oh man, that's going to get me today? Is it really happening all that much? No. Most of them are offensive. You have your Dragapult, you have your Blacephalons, that sort of thing, where it's offensive Ghosts. There's Aegislash if you want to count that defensively, but even that's really hard to fit onto a team. It's an overall okay typing. I think it's certainly a step up from these other types, don't get me wrong. It's a really good offensive type as well. It only is resisted by Dark, and obviously Normal is immune. So really, it's a great offensive type, but it's just not quite good enough defensively, with what it's trying to wall being fighting. It just can't do it effectively with, knockoff being so prevalent, especially in national decks. I can't, afford to put any higher. And next up will be fighting. Fighting, as we just said, is, has an immunity with Ghost, can't hit Ghost. It resists a few different things, but really not a lot. Dark being the main one. It's a pretty lackluster typing. Obviously, it resists it resists Rock, as we just said. Resists Bug. It's not a good type. It's awesome for breaking Dark and Normal. It's great to have a fighting type paired with a Ghost type together, because they are pretty good offensive typings, but defensively it's not great. Offensively by itself, just the typing itself is not good enough. It needs to have that extra Dark, but overall it's solid. There's a lot of good fighting types out there. The Swords of Justice, Mega Gallade, Mega Medi. There's a lot of good fighting types. There's not a lot of great defensive fighting types. And like I said, fighting in combination with other things is great, but I'm trying to look, specifically at this type and what is it weak to, what does it do well, and overall this is a pretty mid type, if I do say so myself. Once again, kind of sticking with the immunity super effectives to each other, we're going to go with Normal, a type that I do value a lot. I want to make it clear. Munchlax is obviously one of my favorite low tiers ever. It is a type that became a lot more prevalent once Spectre was released, I think. Normal was never like where's my Normal? But when Spectre was released, especially Gen 8 Spectre, I want to put that out there. This might have been a little bit higher had this been, Gen 8, not just Gen 9. But Gen 9 does get Draining Kiss, which I know doesn't hit super effective. It does get Terra, which I know not always a Terra Captain, but Normal is really only good for Ghost. It's nice to have a low tier Normal, but there's no reason really to ever spend 12 points on a Snorlax when you could spend 3 on Munchlax, and you get 90% of the value? Why pay 7 for Licky Licky when you get 3 for Munchlax? You know, why would you pay... I can go on and on. Porygon 2. It's the same thing. I love, you know, Gunna, Porygon Z, that's my guy, but overall, it's not a good offensive typing. Only has 1 resistance, I believe, with Steel, and then 1 immunity with Ghost. So, it's an okay type. Like, it's... Defensively, it's got its 1 calling card, and offensively, it's just okay. No super effectives, but it's an okay type. I think people do hate it a little bit too much, but it's really nice for a lot of the offensive ghosts that you're going to see. After that, we have Flying. Also, I'll fix this, I guess, after, because these will be in order. So yeah, I want it to be on that side. Flying, let's talk about it. This might be a little lower than some people are expecting. It's kind of the same vein as Ghost, where people are like, oh, well, it's immune to ground. That's one of the best types in the game. Most grounds are getting Stone Edge, right? Like, it's a good type to have, but I'm not prioritizing Flying ever on a team. I'm never like, oh, man, let me make sure I go get my Flying. Unless I'm getting Torn, or like, I don't even know, man. It's not a type you should ever be like, that's my number 1 priority, unless it's Torn. You know, there's obviously like Thundies, a few other options, but it's not a Pokemon like other than Torn. I keep saying it, but there's no other main one that you're like, I have to go get that. Flying is a good type to have. You don't want to be weak to ground because it's an awesome offensive typing. It's good to have a Flying. It's just not a priority, and it should never be a priority on a team. If you get it with Torn, great, because he does it all. But if you don't feel like, who's my Flying? I have 3 points. I need to go get fucking Swanna. You'll probably be fine. Just invest in like a Grass at that point. Maybe get a Levitator, And that's the other thing. Levitate makes Flying just, a lot worse. Especially because Drill is nowhere near as good as it used to be. Mold Breaker isn't as big of a deal. You don't have to worry about it as much. Flying is a fine type. It's just not, completely needed. Obviously, Defog is great, but yeah. And that will just about close us out for this tier. I have one more, and that's going to be Psychic, which again, some people are like, man, that's kind of low. Is it? Is it that low? It's almost a top 10 type. Psychic, let's talk about it. Is it really that good? Like, obviously they made Dark in Gen 2 because of how good Psychic was. You can't hit Dark. You are resisted by Steel. You are resisted by, I think, nothing else. Yeah, I just want to make sure. It's a really good offensive type. It's really good defensively for things like Mega Medi. It's almost like a necessity. Close. It's not a necessity because you can get away with just having like a bulky water. You can get away with certain things like a fairy, and just kind of play like a wall Medi by committee type of thing. But having like a bulky psychic like Necrozma, like Mew, things like that, it is super valuable. And I'm not gonna act like it's just oh, this is such a bad type. There's a lot of good psychics out there. Uxie's a good mid tier that I like. I know not everyone's a fan of it. But a lot of these psychics also get rocks, which is huge. But overall, it's just an okay type. Not something I personally seek out majority of the time. It's just kind of there. When you're making cores, psychics, to me, not really one of the main ones. And that makes us move on to our next tier, where I almost had these two swaps, Psychic and Grass. Grass is a really good typing for one reason. It resists ground. And that's kind of it. This is one of the biggest flaws I think people make with Draft League is when they take Pokemon like Shaman, they take Pokemon like Celebi, or anyone of that kind of sort. You get my gist. Grass types that are between like 14 and 10 points, where you're spending so many points on this to do what Grottle, what Quilladin, what Leafeon, what a lot of these low tier grasses can accomplish. They're doing 90% of that without having to pay 90% of the cost. It's having a high tier grass, unless it's like Mega Venu, but even then, there's a lot of other megas. I mean, how many other high tier grasses are there? There's not a lot because it's just not a valuable type. Bulu's completely fallen off a cliff. Rillaboom is weaker. I don't see it drafted really anymore. Even in national decks, it's drafted, but it's not like a priority. It's just not the same type it used to be. I have it higher than Psychic because I think resisting ground is more important than resisting Medi, like specifically, and kind of Gallade, even though it gets knockoff. But grass is a really good type, but you have to be efficient about how you get your grass. Get Tangela for 5, don't get Tangrowth for 13. Get Grottle for 2, don't get Shaman for 12. That's what I'm trying to instill into people. Low tier grasses are so much more valuable than a mid tier grass. And there's certain situations, if you're building a regen team and you want to have, Tangrowth or a Moongus, sure, knock yourself out. But you really need to hit your low tiers, and your team needs to still have depth. Because if it doesn't, then that's the gaping hole you're looking at. After that, speaking of a Moongus, we have a Poison. A type I've kind of come around. I used to not actually be a huge Poison guy, but T-Spikes are so annoying. That's kind of why it's this high, honestly. T-Spikes are so deterred when you just having a Poison type on your team, a grounded Poison, I should clarify. Crobat, mid. I don't know, Wheezing Galar with Levitate, mid. But having a grounded Poison like Glow King, which obviously is an incredible Pokemon, even like a Muckalola, who is a Pokemon I like, just having that grounded Poison is absolutely huge. It hits fairies, which is amazing, because that's one of the best types of the game. Spoiler. And there's really not a lot to talk about with this one. You are weak to ground, which, join the fucking club. So is everything else. Poison is a solid overall type. Very good for fairies. Without fairies and without T... If there was no fairy types and no T-Spikes, I think this would be, the single worst type in the game. But because of those two, very solid. Very, very middle of the road. It could be anywhere from, here to where, flying and normal, kind of in between them, maybe. That's, its lowest, and this is probably its highest. Maybe you could have it up, but I would disagree. After that, we have Fire. One of my favorite overall types. It is, I think, probably just my favorite type in general. This is kind of a weird one. You resist Fairy. You're not super effective against Fairy, but you do resist it. You hit Steel, which is, obviously massive. You have just a good type chart in general. You are weak to a few things. Ground, once again, join the fucking club. Rock, Water, another amazing type. It's a volatile type chart, but I think it's a valuable type overall. Things like, I don't like Arcanine, but, you can soft check a lot of Pokemon with Arcanine. Rotom Heat is one of the best Draft League Pokemon, stop, just with a bullet. It's an awesome Pokemon. And Fire is a huge part of that, especially Fires with Levitate, which I know there's not a ton of them, but Rotom is an incredible Pokemon. And there's a lot of just good Fire types out there. You're talking Victini, we already talked about Blacephalon. You have a lot of options out there. I'm sure I'm even missing some, but it's a really good offensive type. I think it's an underrated defensive type, just because a lot of Pokemon do get fire coverage as well, and they were going to want to run it for Scizors and things like that. So overall, very solid type. It can't be Willowed. It's the only Willow immunity, if you will. And solid type. I debated having this one as high as number 6, but it comes in at number 8 for me. And next up, we have Rotom Heat's counter type, Electric, which this might be a little low for some other people. Look, this is fucking hard, man. I'd say from about Fire. Honestly, I could even have these moved up here. I kind of want to. Should I do this? Should I do this mid thing? Maybe I'll cut this. No, I won't cut this out. I kind of want to have these up here. I think they're better than these two types. Electric and Fire are both really good. And Electric, we're going to focus on. We just talked about Fire. Let's have this conversation. So, Electric, obviously, this is especially in Gen 6 when Draft League really became prominent. It was Volturn. You want to have your fast Electric. Now it's kind of just having an Electric in general is really solid because you have your things like Zapdos, Rotoms, your bulky Electrics, even say, Electros, just things like that. There's a lot of electric types out there, but it's still a great type because Volt Switch is such a good move. You resist flying. You only have one true weakness in ground, which is pretty cool. All things considered, you have like an overall solid type chart. But Volt Switch, I know I'm not trying to focus on the moves too much. It is so important to have. And it's a really good type overall. I, again, could kind of move this one around a little bit, but yeah. Next up, we are going to go with a bit of a controversial one. This is probably my most controversial one yet. I'm going to have Dragon. I was originally going to do this a little bit differently, but I kind of, even midway through here, changed my mind. Dragon is an incredible type. I think this is where there's the elite types. I almost want to just have these two by themselves. And once again, I might cut this. I think I'll leave it. I kind of want to have this here, but I'm going to leave it here for now and see how I feel. I might come back to it. Dragon is an awesome type, especially type chart wise. You resist, the fire, water, grass, all of them. You have a lot of like key. You're not resisted by anything besides steel, and obviously fairy's immune to you. And dragons are just so strong in general, just as a type. Like their stats are high, but there's also like good mid-tier dragons. Dragalge is an awesome one. I think it's really underrated. Drudagon, not one of my favorites personally, but I know it's used a lot. Guzzlord is a really cool low-tier dragon. Haxorus is like a mid-tier dragon that I think, especially with Terra, really, really cool option. It's just like all the way up the tier list. You're going to find dragons that are like, man, that's really good. Man, that's even better. And it's a bountiful type. You want to make sure you get your dragon, because they will kind of go early. But I think especially with Terra, you have even more options. Like Regidrago with Terra is an awesome mon. So personally, I think it's an awesome type. I might even move it up to must-have, but I'd say it's right on the cusp. You don't need a dragon, but it's like kind of teetering on the line. If I could put it right about here, I would. But yeah, this is going to move us into the top 5 types, and I'm going to start us off with Dark. This type, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this. I think Dark is one of the most important types to have. Knockoff and Stab Knockoff in general, super, super clutch. Pursuit, especially in Legacy Leagues, incredible move. Those two combined, and I know, again, it's not all about moves, but that is part of it. Those two moves are incredible. On top of that, you're immune to Psychic, you're one of Ghost's only switch-ins, and you stop Stored Power. And when Stored Power became widely distributed in Gen 8 because of, I believe it became a TM or a TR, one of the two, Dark became an essential type to have. You have to have a Dark type now, because as soon as someone with Mew sees it, as soon as someone with, Necrozma, with, any of those like bulky psychics, they're just going to take advantage of you. They're going to run Calm Mind, even Iron Defense, Stored Power, and like a healing move. And you can't let that happen. You got to at least force them to run Body Press and make a choice. Even if it's like a shit, say like it's like who's a shit Dark? Skuntank, right? You force them to be like, do I really want to run Body Press for Skuntank? It's just that mind game where Dark is an essential type, and you probably should have one better than Skuntank, but even at that point, it's more important to get like a Dark that's 1 point. I'd rather have Linoon Galar than like Armaldo, because at least I force them to think about it, right? And I might be wrong on that, but again, it's just my opinion. And moving on to the next one, we have the Fairy type, and this is going to get so many, like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, mystery. Oh, Fairy's one of the best. You have to have a bulky. No, you don't. You don't have to have a bulky Fairy, all right? Because Diancie is a great Pokemon. There's a lot of good Fairies on the board, especially now. I think at Gen 6, it was very fair to be like, you have to get your Fairy early. If you didn't get Clef, if you didn't get Sylveon, if you didn't get, even Florgist, you're like, man, there's no Fairy types left. I think there's enough now. There's the Tapus. Like, you have options at Fairy that I think you can get by with. You have Mega Diancie. Like, there are plenty of Fairies now that do different jobs. Even like Tinkaton as a low tier, Granbull. I think there's options all the way up and down the board. Comfey is another one I like. You don't have to make this your number one priority. It's a great type to have. Obviously, being immune to Dragon is huge. Being resistant to fighting in dark, which is really nice. Just as those two are very commonly put together with like CC and knockoff. I love the fairy type. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think it's like the end all be all like some people do. Like, oh, where's the fairy on this team? This is a horrible team. No, look. If you have Granbull, you're probably gonna be okay. Like it's not the end of the world. You'll bring him to a few matchups where you need him, and that's it. You'll be fine. But overall, it's a very, very good type. I'm not trying to shit on it too much. I just think some of the fairy type fans need to get a grip. Next up, we have water. You're probably going to see one down here that you just don't really agree with me, and I kind of want to, save my piece for that. Water is an awesome type. One of the best defensive types, obviously, in the game. Amazing type chart. You resist steel, you resist fire, you resist ice other than freeze dry. Like, it's just offensively, there's so many good things you can do. You soft check, you're only weak to 2 types, and one of them's fucking grass. Like, your type chart is just incredible. You soft check so many things with, like, whether it's like even shitter water types in this generation, like Suicune or Milotic, things like that. You hard check so many things, and yeah, it's a really solid type, especially with flip turn. I debated putting this 2. I kind of feel like it might be 2, but I just have a conviction about one of these types. I just have to have it higher. But water is one of the best types. I would say the top 3, if you don't have them, it's a bad team. For sure, 100%. Like, I don't respect your team if you don't have these 3 types. But all the ones in here, I think are still necessities. But at least I can, if I see a team with like their fairy type is like fucking Cutie Fly or whatever, like just a 1-pointer, I'm not gonna like it, but I at least could be like, okay, like you have a really good steel type. You're not dry. Like if especially if they have like double steel, there's things you can do. I think these 3 types are necessities. And next up, we're gonna go with the ground typing, which probably people will think is a little too high. Let me give my case. This is debatably the best offensive type in the game. Hitting steel, which is huge. You hit fire, amazing type. Well, not amazing, very good type. You hit poison, which has become much more prevalent with fairies. You have almost every ground type's gonna have rock coverage, so you hit even your immunity with flying. You just hit every, ice is super effective against you. You're hitting that. Like, it's just, you hit everything, man. Like, ground is such an awesome type. It forces teams that have, limited ground switch-ins. Earthquake's so, like, widely distributed. Everyone has Earthquake. So, and there's no drawback. And that's part of the reason, too, is, like, Earthquake is such a good move with no drawbacks that it's, like, you can't be ground weak. You just can't. Not to mention, you're immune to electric. So, Volt Switch stopped right on, in its tracks. That's absolutely massive. The only one of the 3 pivot moves, or well, attacking pivot moves, obviously there's like baton pass and stuff. But the only one of the 3 that you can just, hard stop. There's nothing you can do. I mean, water absorb, but you get my point. Ground is an absolutely essential type to have, and me personally, I almost want to have it 1, but I know I'd get crucified by everybody. So I'll just leave it there. And that, of course, leaves 1 typing, and that is steel. Steel, especially with fairy, becoming so prevalent, is such an important type. The defense of most steel types is absolutely incredible. You resist dragon, you resist fairy, you resist flying, you resist normal, ice, rock, bug, immune to poison. It's an awesome type, right? We all know that. Typically, your rockers are coming from a steel or a ground type. It's not coming from an actual rock type itself. So just your steel type has to be someone you can rely on. You want, even a Registeel. That I know it's kind of depends from league to league, but obviously I'm a big Registeel fan. It's so important to have like a reliable steel on every team. And with teams without steals, it's like, man, you're weak to everything. It feels like that. It feels like everything becomes opened up. I don't love a lot of the steel flyings, like Corv, Skarmory, Celesteela, things like that. I'm not a huge fan personally, but they're still really valuable. I like my steel that can set up rocks. even like Mega Aggron that has like sweeping potential with things like Iron Defense, Rock Polish, Curse. Like there's a lot of different things you could do with that. It's just an incredible typing, and to me, it wasn't too difficult to put it number one. But let me know what you think. I really do want to see your comments. DM me on Discord, DM me on Twitter at Based Mystery, and follow me on Twitch. My username is MysteryCD. And without further ado, I want to thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it. Look out for more videos in the future. I promise, with summer coming, I'm going to try and stick to one video a week. I really don't want you to hold me to it. I'd like to do one of these type of videos, like a discussion video a week, and a mid-tier Monday, or a mid-tier Monday and, a draft league breakdown. I want to do 2 videos a week, but try to look out for at least one a week. And I'm going to see how long I can do that. I've got a few videos on the back burner, and, suggest something to me in the comments, and I'll see what I can do. So, you guys have a good one. Peace out. Bye-bye.